Welcome to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer. Welcome to Government and Politics Tuesday. We like to theme out our shows here. Why? Well, it's in a way it's for you, in a way it's for us, because it's very easy to get pigeonholed into certain kinds of topics. But we are committed to covering everything in the region, and so it forces us to every day of the week. We're business and culture on Mondays, government and politics on Tuesdays, faith and family on Wednesdays, and then media and education on Thursdays. And that makes sure that we're finding people in different sectors, because if you haven't noticed, it's really easy to fall into your own bubble. And then it becomes an echo chamber. And it's nice. It's a lot of confirmation bias going on, but not a lot of good information for us to be able to run our lives on, shape our community, our families, our businesses, and things like that. Now, for you, maybe there are certain topics you're just interested in, and you're like, hi, you know what, I'm just going to come in on Tuesdays or listen to your podcast from Monday. So it makes it easier for you also to organize that. And today on Government and Politics Day, we have, I have to tell you, I think this is, it's probably, in a way, we use this word, not in a profane way, but when when we're in the news and stuff and we say something sexy, like that it's really like it's really going to get, and you know what it is? You know what we're talking about today? Wait for it. Environmental policy. Okay, no, you're not allowed to change the dial, because here at the Peak, we always do things Peak style. And so we're going to make it interesting for you. You need to know about this, because one of the things we're going to talk about today is a lot of people feel that environmental policy is only for people on the left, people who are liberals. They're the only ones who are talking about that. But actually, it involves everything that we do. I mean, if you want to know about your utility prices and gas and oil, guess what? That's environmental policy is going to be there, talking about different types of developments here. Every development here, there's environmental studies that are done. That's part of the policies that we have about whether things can be built or not built. Whole industries are regulated according to this. And of course, the amazing wildlife and why we most likely came to live in Colorado is because it's so beautiful and we want to preserve that. And every day there are elected and a lot of unelected people who are determining these policies. And so we've brought on today someone who is an environmental issues political strategist, and we're going to find out later how one becomes such a thing. His name is Andrew Sandstrom, and we're going to be talking about environmental policy issues, including tariffs and public land issues and solar, and even about federal layoffs. Andrew Sandstrom, thanks so much for being on the Peak.
It's great to be here. We're really going to pop everybody's bubbles when you talk about being in an echo chamber.
Okay.
Conservative environmental right there. There's two bubbles that just got shattered.
Got shattered. So even people, who would you consider yourself a policy wonk? Like, are you just someone who just loves policy all the time, or is it
a recovering policy wonk? Yeah. It's,
how do you get over that?
My sobriety dates today.
Okay.
I mean, you don't. You just get in deeper and deeper, and it's very rewarding. And I think when you focus on policy and you focus on, resources and where we can come together, there's a lot less polarization than you get when you focus on politics. Now, I tend to focus on both in my career, but it's really rewarding to, not just talk about where we disagree, but talk about where we can find solutions too.
And it turns out we didn't even plan this, but it turns out today is Earth Day. So it's like we planned it, but I'm never going to tell you something that, to just score points here, but it's Earth Day. But what does Earth Day mean? That has become politicized in so many ways. So we're not going to be focusing on that, but we might as well. Somebody figured that April 22nd was Earth Day. I don't know who made that decision. But we're going to be talking about in the headline segment about new developments that seem like they're going on the Eastern Plains are going to happen. Also some ways, changes that the city council has changed the way that they're running the city council meetings, which according to things that, I thought we were moving in a better direction, I'm not that happy about. And also, of course, because we are in legislative session, some news, maybe that's the dirty laundry coming down from the legislature. And then Andrew, later on, will be talking about how environmental policy is not just for liberals and getting into some of those topics. And most importantly, how you can get involved in these areas so that you can look out for our environmental policy here in the Pikes Peak region as well as around the state. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to The Peak News. We have the sexiest topic of all, which is, of course, environmental policy on the program today. Stick around with it. You know we always make it interesting and try to make it fun. You're listening to The Peak. We're so happy that you are, and we'll be right back after this short break. Okay, cool. Good first segment.
You call me sexy too many times, and
I'm not calling you sexy. I'm calling the topic sexy. No, I'm not calling. I'll clear that up when we come back from the break. Andrew's wife called during the.
Wants to know what's
Are you
going
hitting
on
on my husband? Okay, so Earth Day we already mentioned, so I'll get into this Mayberry thing.
And
then
to what degree do you want? Should I just watch for your cues?
Yeah, I'll look to you. I'll try. It's more like I do. I say I do the play-by-play, and you do color commentary on it. Like I'll put out the basics of this. What was that? The one that Disney. What's that Disney built that model village like 30 years ago in Orlando?
Oh,
it's called like Centennial or something like that.
I'm not sure, but I know what you're referring to.
Disney Model Village, Orlando. Celebration. That's it.
Let me tell you, when I host a podcast, I have this little Control Z thing I can do. You don't have that here.
What?
I can always edit what I say on a podcast. You can't do that here. No, well, I just take a break and.
Okay, we're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The answer today is Government and Politics Tuesday, and we are talking environmental policy and why you should care with Andrew Sandstrom, who is an environmental issues political strategist. And I needed to clarify with him because he felt I was using the word sexy too much, that I was not referring to him. But, it's radio. You can imagine anything that you want. But we're talking about that, this is generally people zone out. Anything that has the word policy, especially when we get into environmental and things like that, because if you want to be involved in government, you have to educate, you have to be engaged, and you have to deal, just like everything in life. If you really want to get in, to the weeds on something and be involved, there are parts of it that seem sort of boring or interesting, or not interesting, or there's a learning curve. But when you understand all the different ways, especially in a state like Colorado, that environmental policy affects your life every single day, even including, the prices that you pay on everything, it's important that we get involved and we not just leave it to people that may not align with your values. Let's just say it that way. So, Andrew, again, thanks for being here on the Peak.
It's great to be here.
So,
I'm glad you clarified, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. Just to make here.
Bounce.
So today is Earth Day. Someone decided that years ago that April 22nd would be Earth Day, and it just so happens that we're doing environmental policy. I did not plan it, but sometimes things come together. But one of the first thing I want to talk about in the headlines is something that was that's in the development. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot of housing development going on in the Colorado Springs Pikes Peak region. Like it's just everywhere. Like it's going on, and if you're looking for a home, you're probably going to like it because potentially it could bring prices down, although for some reason it doesn't seem to be so much. But how we develop things, especially people who move up into the mountains or out on the eastern plain. I live out in that area. And why did we move out there? Because we didn't want to be in the city. But we know that the city is going to chase us there. So there's always, if you look up in the papers talking about new developments, there are people who do this professionally and they're seeking to make money and put in more housing, and that's just going to be the way it's going to be. But of course, they need to come before the city council, the county commissioners, and this caught my eye, which is developers move ahead on a project called Mayberry. And so this is based on the whole Andy Griffith show, Mayberry, of doing not just houses, but an actual community, like that would have its own, not just a clubhouse, but have more of an economy out there, reasons for people to just stay in that area. Now, I remember years ago, as you probably do, Disney did this in Orlando called Celebration, which has, as the decades went on, it turned it to its own government there that was actually fighting with the state and everything else. I don't think anybody's going to have that much land and that much power, but there are still concerns. And of course, developers, first they have to sell the elected officials, and how they sell them. Well, that's an interesting thing some of the time, as well as then you got to go sell the people. You have to make it attractive. Why should they buy homes there? So look into this because Mayberry is promoting itself as a truly complete community with space for commercial district, school, fire station, different housing options, single family home community. And this is on 94. This is in the Ellicott area. So sort of south of Peyton. And they are looking at having homes, some below 400,000, some above 500,000, as well as apartments and townhomes and stuff like that. And I know that the people that move out and buy 5 acres or 40 acres aren't so into that. So, Andrew Sandstrom, how does this involve our local environmental policy when people want homes and others don't want want open space?
Well, this is interesting for me because I moved here a little bit over a year ago. My wife grew up here; she grew up in the Briargate area, and then she went to Utah for school. She met me. We had 2 kids, and we moved here to be closer to family. And so my wife's a child of the Springs who was one person, and she went away for a while, and she came back, and now she's 4 people, and I'm one of those people. So I'm a little bit on that side where, I was looking for a house a little while ago. Now I wanted to be closer to family. We bought an existing home here in the Springs, but I'm actually encouraged to see some master planning happening. So you bring up Disney. I've seen twice once where they did this before, and once where they're planning on doing this, where they do a master planned community. And if you do it right, I think there can be a lot of benefits. There's always going to be pain with growth. I think a lot of that pain's inevitable, and I think that you have to start mitigating that early and figure out, because growth is rough. I saw that in my hometown growing up. When I grew up, you could have considered it rural, and now it's suburban. So I like to see the master plan. I love to see some mixed development where you're not just building McMansions, but where you're letting people like me be able to buy a house.
Just real quick so we can move on. Have you seen public comment matter when it comes to development here before city council or county commissioners?
Yeah, I don't think there's any issue that will elicit more anger than messing with somebody's home, and people feel that way when you start to mess with their community. So I understand why anytime there's development, it's a tough issue.
But the question is, is it listened to? And I guess it depends on, you getting up, speaking, how many people pour out, and as well as the officials themselves. And so that takes us into our next article, which I'm somewhat surprised, as we just swore in our new city council last week. They have made changes to public comment time and rules in order to streamline. The two big things are, rather than having public comment at the beginning at a fixed time, meaning public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Things are on the agenda, you show up at that approximate time, you can comment. But for things that people just want to come in and talk about, it used to be at the beginning of the meeting, and it would go on and on and on and on. And I understand why to the officials, but they are our elected officials. That could be bothersome. Now they're moving them to the end. But when does that start and when do you show up? Well, that's not a fixed time. At least they haven't addressed that yet. The other is the 3 minutes of comment that you're always limited to. But, and I've played this game, you come with a few people and you want to talk longer. Well, that person gets up and cedes their time. They've just decided no one's allowed to do that anymore at city council. So I thought that we were getting things that were, Jim Miller talks about this. He ran for city council, having city council meetings at night when more people can attend, making them easier to comment on and stuff. It seems, and I'd like to get city council member, maybe we can get Lynette Crow-Iverson to let us know why this is happening, but it seems on the surface that it's making it more difficult for people to get involved in the process than less. Do you have anything to say on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that sometimes in local government, there's a decision that to them feels very administrative, but then when it ends up hitting the public, it turns out it's a lot more than that. And I'm hoping it's that sort of thing where maybe there's some kind of logistics reason. Sometimes there's something that local officials would say is a logistics reason, but maybe they just don't want more public comment. Hope it's not that, but yeah, speak up and we'll see what
And
happens.
so, of course, go down and make public comment, but when you can do that, we don't know. But you'll have 3 minutes, and that's it. So make sure that you're terse. Okay, lastly, Colorado Senate passes Democratic bill to prevent immigration checks at schools, churches, and hospitals. This passed the Senate. It's Senate Bill 276. And if it passes the House and is signed, would prohibit schools, including colleges and universities, healthcare facilities, and daycare facilities from allowing immigration officials into their facilities without a warrant, meaning that those who are illegal can exist in those spaces without law enforcement being able to go in and bust them there. We have about a minute left. What do you think about that, Andrew?
In general, I'm glad to see that we're enforcing on illegal immigration
through ICE now and more cooperation.
Yeah. I think it's probably good, at least with churches. I do believe in sort of a level of sanctuary, right? The same when you're talking to your pastor, you're talking to your priest. I believe in having a certain level of protection there. So I'm not against it. I do think that broader, having some more deportations, having a more law and order system is probably a good thing. I do think that for churches specifically, that spoke to me. I wouldn't want a deportation happening at my church.
Not that those who pass these laws ever negotiate with us, the general public, but I would say I could see that as a privacy issue within these things, but then agree that you will, at a police station, you will detain that person until ICE comes and not release them. How about we negotiate for that? As a police station somewhere, if someone's already arrested, that it's okay to deport them from there. Anyway, I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. We're talking environmental policy. We'll be right back with Andrew Sandstrom.
I forgot.
Okay, so.
I forgot about that with the police station. That's crazy. The not cooperating with us.
Yeah. So they're gone by the time ICE shows up. If they won't hold them and things like that. So, okay, we have about 3 minutes till we're back. This is where you're going to monologue.
Okay.
Okay, so again, high energy, stay on the topic. I will give you these time cues of 3, 2, 1, and this means 30 seconds. So make sure you sort of have your points so that you can self-edit along the way. If you're planning to read, that becomes more difficult, but that's, try to read without sounding like you're reading as much as possible. But you'll have about 4 minutes to get through it. So as you see the time cues, you'll learn to self-edit, but we want to make sure that you hit your points. So that's that. The reason I don't do wrap-up, but 30 seconds, that gives you time to put a final chapter on it. Try to use up all the time. If you fall short, I'll ask a quick follow-up question, but otherwise try to fill up the time, which again will be about 4 minutes. And that's it. That is, environmental policy is not just for liberals. Okay, 3 minutes. So we're back. Hey, so what have you decided? The fifth, well, not legal. On the 15th was the first day that medical shops in the Springs could start selling recreational without a medical permission.
So I remember, no, this is the one he recorded in March 20th. He says, hey, recreational marijuana is legal in the Springs now. And I remember thinking, oh, he's kind of wrong. But now he's right.
Well, it is legal, but they weren't able to sell it yet.
So what I'm saying is,
So does it fit? Okay, so I can preview it as, hey, rec marijuana.
The cannabis industry, but really it's saying that like we all agree in the city too, like everyone wants to keep it away from kids or something like that. I can realize.
So it's Jim's rant on the cannabis industry. Is that what we would say?
Well, about it. Basically, now it's legal, and what does that mean?
Okay. Okay, and do you have a time yet?
Yeah, it's like 2:37.
Okay, so it's a little.
I had to do it during the break.
Okay, let me know if that sticks. Otherwise, I'll count. I mean, I prefer it at 2:30, but
Unless I go trim it again, but I can only do it during the break since I can't use that computer, and I can only edit.
And is this since he lost the election? So he's saying I lost mayor, I lost city council.
Before I cut out.
So you cut that part out. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it, man. Okay, we're back in 10. Okay, so deliver it.
Okay.
And you're going to give your background a little bit as a conservative. Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to us on Government and Politics Tuesday. And in government and politics, we feel like we're being lied to all the time. But will we lie to you? No. We're here to try to give you good information, put it in context, have you think, and then guess what? Decide what you think is true and what it means to you. Usually when we say something is true or not, there's ultimate truths, but usually it's meaning. It's what does it mean to me? And I can't determine that for you. And one thing that we do know that through the years, environmental policy, which is the topic that we have here today with Andrew Sandstrom, that it's something that the liberal side of the political spectrum tends to focus on, and conservatives who are not so much in the know tend to stay out of it. But Andrew Sandstrom, environmental issues political strategist and a conservative himself, believes that environmental policy is not just for liberals. Andrew.
So full disclosure, as you said, I'm a conservative. I knew I was going to be a Republican when I was 8 years old, and I, voted in my second grade class for Bush over Gore. So since then, right, I was president of college Republicans at Brigham Young University when I was a student there. I've been involved with young Republicans, both when I lived in Utah and here in Colorado and El Paso County. I've worked on conservative campaigns, and I was trained in conservative political philosophy when I was a political science major, my professor was a Straussian of the Straussian school. And if you know anything about that, way too wonky for radio, but very conservative school of thought. So, how do you end up in environmental policy as a conservative? I can talk about that later. But what I will say is it's an important area for Republicans, for conservatives, and for everybody to really engage on. And what I can say about that is, since working in environmental policy, right, talking to young people here in Colorado, it's amazing the response you tell to somebody, that you get from somebody when you tell them, I'm a conservative and I've got some conservative solutions for climate change. I don't think that folks from older generations understand just how important it is for a conservative student or a conservative young professional to have answers to their friends on those issues. And also, you talk about public policy, either at the national level, the state level, or the local level, right? If you're not at the table on policy issues, you're going to end up being on the menu. And too often, we've omitted ourselves, or we've been omitted, and there's been some bad decisions that are made there, right? You talk about energy. There's been a lot of decisions that have been made about energy that cause your prices to go up, right? Conservatives can come to the table and talk about, if we're going to do energy cleaner, how can we make it more affordable? How can we make sure that we're not driving up costs for families and for working class, right? But also with environmental policy, you get into the idea of, is the fuel source bad? Do we want to focus on emissions, on the pollution, or do we want to focus on the fuel? And too often liberals will come in and say, we're going to get rid of all oil and gas, or we're never going to mine uranium, right? Which is crazy, because nuclear power is an amazing source of energy and is clean. And conservatives can come in and say, we want to focus on the emissions, and you can actually work with industries instead of against them. And you'd be surprised. There was actually a conference here in Colorado Springs with offshore oil and drilling. They came and met at the Broadmoor. I met with a lot of guys there. Some of the most environmentally forward, climate-minded people I've met working for oil companies. And too often Democrats want to work against them instead of working with them. And so conservatives have a lot to bring to the table. And so by engaging in that policy discussion, there's, on the one hand, a lot of solutions that we can offer. And on the other hand, we can help conservative young people to be able to have an answer to give to friends, and to be able to, marry their interest in protecting the environment with their interest in traditional values or in market economics or whatever it is that makes them conservative.
So climate change. I mean, that's something, is that?
I dared say it, yeah.
Yeah. So what, you got the, 30 seconds, 30 seconds.
I hope people didn't shut off the radio or veer off the road. But look, I see climate as a risk management problem. I don't want to tell you the world's ending, because it's probably not. I don't want to tell you nothing's happening, because I'm convinced probably something's happening. Think about it as a risk management issue. You want to be able to mitigate the risk without having to break the bank, just like you would on insurance or anything else. And so I think about policy that way. I think that's the conservative way to approach a complex challenge.
Okay, so what did you hear there? It's not about abandoning the issue. It's about reframing it according to the way you think and the way that you want to deal with it, and then being able to have a conversation about it as opposed to running away or having an argument. I think that's very sound advice. We're here with Andrew Sandstrom, environmental issues political strategist. When we come back, we're going to find out how one becomes such a thing. You're listening to The Peak. Okay, this is just 2 minutes. Good segment.
Okay, good.
Good deal. Okay, so we're on 4. So this is the one with the major questions. So you can review that and make any notes or whatever. We're just back in about a minute and a half.
Okay, great.
And is this a profession for you? Do you make money doing this for consulting with?
Yeah, there's an organization that's launching that I wish had launched so I could talk about it here, but it's going to be a month or so.
So can you allude to it, or you have to stay away from it completely?
No, for now I've got to stay away from it.
Okay.
I mean,
so but how do
on YouTube are getting the behind the scenes right now? But,
okay.
You can just say I work with conservative actors in that space. I work on.
And they as a consultant?
Yeah, as a consultant.
Okay.
That's going to change here in a few weeks. But for now, it's
okay, cool. Well, let us know. Especially if you wanted to sort of do a regular segment, on it, it would have to be journalistically more
Sure.
neutral than you
Yeah,
probably
just
do.
be transparent about it.
Yeah,
Right.
but then you can plug. But if then you plug your podcast, if people want
I would
what
love
you
to plug my
really what you
podcast.
really do, that's the thing. If you can give us good journalistic, local, hyper local content, really, why does it apply to the Pikes Peak region? Then we can, you or we can tag it with your podcast, and so
I'd love to do that.
cross promotional. But yeah, I'd love to love that. I actually talked to Travis Deal when he was here, the CEO of Colorado Springs Utilities, about doing a regular segment, but he didn't.
wow, that
He
would
didn't
be
show back up. So if you want to, welcome back to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to us on AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer across the entire Pikes Peak region, and we show up here 4 days a week, 3 to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday, as well as on podcast at thepeak.news. And why do we exist? To say the quiet stuff out loud. Why? Because media has failed us. They really have. Locally across the country, it doesn't seem to matter. It lost its way. Let me just say that. And we're trying to find that way back as a community. And so it's not the Chaim Goldman show. You don't see that in the title. You don't even see it in the byline. Why? It was never designed to be my program. I'm just sort of a placeholder until y'all start coming in more and more and more, as we're seeing with reporters and guests, of course, from the beginning, but with our citizen journalists and interns to come in and help us tell these stories across the region. So if you're passionate about it and want to be part of a platform that is redefining media and definitely taking charge here, still a startup, just into our second year in a way, we invite you to go on thepeak.news, find out where you fit in, reach out to us, and become part of this crazy grassroots experiment of what we're doing here. Well, today is Earth Day. Didn't even think of that until we were in pre-production today. And it just so happens that we booked an environmental issues political strategist and policy strategist, Andrew Sandstrom. And we've been talking about environmental policy issues throughout. Andrew is specifically, he's a conservative and he has his own podcast. So if you're really into this stuff and want to hear his take, it's Public Lands Policy Podcast. And you can find that on your favorite podcast platform. Do you focus in on Colorado, or is it national, or is it just whatever topic fits your fancy at the time, Andrew?
So sometimes it's national, sometimes it's regional. I just launched last year, and I only come out with an episode about once a month. So I haven't done a Colorado episode specifically, but it's on the docket. It's something I'm going to do.
Okay. Well, I've been, at the breaks, we've been talking about Andrew maybe being a regular contributor here, because we do hear about legislation. And it's a hot topic, and then it gets passed, and then that's when all the policy really comes in with all the unelected bureaucrats, and that's where we got to pay attention, because that's where all the usage fees and fines and all of that stuff and what you can and can't do come in. So, Andrew, starting out, give us a little bit about your background. How does one become an environmental issues political policy strategist, especially as a conservative?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a little bit of a wild story. So when I was in college, I was at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, and I had a roommate who was in San Juan County, where the whole Bears Ears controversy was happening. And I had a friend who worked for the Trump White House. And so when Trump came to Salt Lake City, Utah to talk about that, I got invited to go see it. And the protest out there, I've never been called such names in my life. I have never seen so much profanity as I did at that protest for that event. And I thought to myself, I love the land that they're talking about. I know so many people who do. And it seems like what you'd call environmentalism has been so co-opted by the left, it's nothing I could have ever been a part of. And I knew so many people that way. And so I was studying political science. I started to, dive deep into issues whenever I could. I actually went on a field trip where we went down to Bears Ears, went down to Navajo Nation, went and talked to park staff at the Grand Canyon, and learned a lot in the field on the ground. And then when I was getting ready to graduate, I thought, just too bad there aren't jobs where this matters. And then there was an organization at the time called Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends that had a tiny ad at the bottom of a newsletter that said, "Hey, we're looking for folks to bring on as consultants for politics if you have a background in college Republicans," which I did, and if you care about environmental issues. And I thought, gee, I thought I was the only person. And since then, I found a whole network of conservatives. Colorado is actually probably one of the biggest places for folks like me. And so, yeah, there's a whole world out there about young, especially with young people. Conservatives want to be more involved in these issues and bring their values to the table when it comes to the environment.
And as far as this being a profession, not just a hobby or an interest, people pay you as a consultant because you have expertise in these areas.
Yeah, especially because of my background in Republican politics. I like to say you have to find someone who's genuinely conservative and genuinely concerned about the environment or about climate. And that was me. And so I come on and I help them when they're working on talking to lawmakers. I do a lot of earned media, which maybe you don't believe with me on this show, but I do a lot of written earned media and help people with their op-eds and such.
Okay, so politics aside, what are the big issues locally in our region in Colorado that everyone should be concerned about regarding environmental policy?
Okay, the first one's not going to come as a surprise, which is wildlife. We all saw what happened with the reintroduction of wolves. And then we had a victory at the ballot box, a victory, if you're on my side of the issue, on cougar hunting, where cougar hunting, if it weren't for a lot of wonderful folks, I was not a part of those campaigns, but if it was not for a lot of wonderful folks who came in and fought hard to beat that ballot initiative, you would have had what we call ballot box biology yet again. Ballot box biology is when you use, a referendum or a ballot initiative to make a decision that should really be made by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, by biologists that are vetted. And also there's the issue with not letting governors politicize the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which can become a little bit of an issue, and make sure that we're hiring people based off of their qualifications as a wildlife biologist and not their ideology. There's a lot of animal rights stuff happening in Colorado that you've got to watch for, and you've got to fight it when it happens.
What else?
I'd also say fires are a big issue. We've got a lot of public lands. A lot of those public lands are forests. And historically, we've not done a great job managing the forest. And it's not because people want to blame it on the Forest Service. It's not because of the Forest Service. It's because of the permitting process we have. There's some good bipartisan work being done on the Fix Our Forests Act that actually Senator Bennett, Democrat from Colorado, but he's a co-sponsor on this with Republicans, and it'll help speed up that permitting process. But there's other work to be done there to make sure to help prevent there from being fires like have been seen here in the past.
Okay, and then things that have built Colorado but have become more and more difficult to do, which is things like mining and oil and gas.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was at a conference with a bunch of, prospectors and experts in mining engineering, and they put a map up of Utah on the board, and they said, look at all these resources. Map of Nevada, look at all these resources. They put a map up on Colorado. They dwelled on it for maybe 30 seconds. They said, yes, there's all these resources, but their permitting, the culture of their government is so bad, there's no point in going there. And then they put the slide down. It made me really sad.
So what can we as citizens that are, here, we conduct business here. Of course, we, pay utilities when they shut down the power plant here in Colorado Springs in order to make it cleaner and not coal, according to those who wanted to do that. But then the utility prices went up. People have to understand that all of these policies end up impacting you, even if you're not a rancher, even if you're not directly in the industry. So what can the average citizen, if there's such a thing, do in this regard to impact environmental policy here in Colorado?
One thing that you could do right now that's in relation to fires is Senator Bennett and other Democrats who are supporting Fix Our Forest Act, they're getting fried by so-called environmental groups that want to fight forest management. They want to fight taking care of our forests so that there's fewer fires. I would email them and show them some love, even if you're like me and you're a conservative through and through. Email these Democrats, especially from here in Colorado, and let them know that you're glad they're doing what they're doing on Fix Our Forests. Anytime that happens, give people love, Republican or Democrat. Give people love when they do good stuff, and get involved. Follow organizations. Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management is one. Follow organizations like that. Get their newsletters. If you're a hunter, it's really easy to get clued in. But even if you're not, get clued into some of the stuff the hunters are doing. They know wildlife better than anybody else. Get clued into what the ranchers are doing and stand up for ranchers. They get picked on a lot. And then when there's an issue and when there's somebody that you're a constituent of, write them, show them love when they do good things, and let them know you're mad when they do bad things.
And I would just say, even though this is the lowest level, especially since it's so easy to do here, is vote. And if you have these values, research when these ballot initiatives come up, and there were so many back in November, and some from a conservative standpoint were successful, many were not. But if you look at the voter turnout, if you didn't vote, then you're giving your vote to somebody else. And, don't stop doing that. It's so easy to vote in this state. But I would say also pick something that you can be passionate about. And I think that's, someone who's getting into a topic that most people stay away from. Why don't you just quickly talking about, and then we'll talk about your podcast, being passionate, how to get passionate about issues that most people stay away from or find boring.
Well, you just got to be a nerd and then lean into it, right? But I think that finding that local impact, for me, it was when I lived in Utah and there was the Bears Ears controversy. It killed me the way the media covered that. You talk about media lies. I could go on a very long rant about the media lies with national monuments. It's got coming here to Colorado. Now, Trump got into the White House, so that was sort of deferred. But that issues like that, right? Just stay clued in and take deep dives.
Yeah, pick something. I would just say pick something. Okay, lastly, we have a minute or so left. You have a podcast that you said is basically new. You've been doing for a little while. Public Lands Policy Podcast. You can find that on your favorite podcast platform. What should people expect when they listen to past episodes, and what are you planning to do with it?
Yeah, don't you love that creative name I came up with?
Yeah.
But
not sexy.
No, it's not. But we every month or so we have a guest on. And we do a deep dive into an issue that they're an expert on, and you're going to get insights you won't get anywhere else.
So, an example?
An example is there actually was an episode where I had Gabriella Hoffman on. We did talk about
the
cougar hunting ban. She is she works for Independent Women's Forum and a couple other organizations, and she does environmental issues on energy. Her and I come down different on some issues, but we really pretty lockstep on public lands.
And so what are you looking for? What's your next one going to be on? Do you have a topic yet for your next?
So I actually have already recorded an episode that's on permitting reform, and it's actually from the perspective of somebody who's really into clean energy, because benefits clean energy, also benefits all other forms of energy. And that's going to be published sometime in the next week.
Okay. Andrew Sandstrom, environmental issues, political and policy strategist. His podcast is Public Lands Policy Podcast. Get passionate. We do love our land out here, and so we need to lean into that. When we come back with Andrew Sandstrom, we're going to be talking about, what are we going to be talking about, Andrew? Oh, federal layoffs in Colorado. That's the topic. We'll be right back with The Peak. Cool. Okay, so on this one, there is no music before I have to throw to a pre-recorded piece. So when I give you the wrap-up, we got to move in that direction. Because there won't be any warning.
Okay, sorry, there's not going to be any warning on what?
On just when we need to finish this segment, because halfway through I have to throw to a pre-recorded segment. So we're going to have about 450 total, but I'll give you about 30 seconds out. We'll throw to a wrap up, and that'll give me time to plug it again and say goodbye to you.
Okay.
And then we at that point, you're done, but I still have, there's a pre-recorded segment, a commercial, and then I finish the program. So
Panicking about making sure it was Senator Bennett, not Hickenlooper.
Okay. Well, if it's not, just correct that when you come back. It's live, so we correct stuff on the fly.
It is amazing how much some of these liberal environmental organizations, how much money they have to fry these guys when they do anything that's not crazy.
I'm going to be in a meeting from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Period. If you don't have time to talk, and then I'm home for a family dinner. Period. If you're going to be up mid-evening, let me know. Otherwise, let's try to figure a time we can talk in the morning if you're available. Period. Thanks. Exclamation point.
Dang, it was Hickenlooper.
Okay, so
You
make
want me to correct that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll correct that.
Yeah, just when I
Something felt wrong about that.
Yeah.
This just happened like last week, so.
Okay. Yeah, we do that. I mean, that's the best you can do is you just, you make a retraction correction. So once I introduce you, say, hey, before I get into that, I just want to make a correction from the last segment. And then you move on.
Yeah, well,
That's all you can do. What would that people would actually own their mistakes and correct them, we'd be in a much better.
yeah,
But
that's true.
because people don't, then people just try to pretend that they were right. We
Yeah,
headed a
that's
really
always,
weird direction.
always embarrassing.
Okay, so do you have a couple points here to mention? Sort of what federal layoffs are we going to be looking at, and
Well,
how do
the
you
ones that
and
we've
how do
already
you think?
looked
Like two
at.
questions, like what have you seen that's a here now or is going to happen, and then what do you see as the impact of that,
Yeah,
either
sure. What's
positive or
happening and the
negative?
impact on the actual management of the forests? Yeah.
Okay, if that's what you want to. Okay,
I, yeah, not prognosticate about the future of what they're going to do now with Doge, but what's happened and
okay. You're listening to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman, on this Government and Politics Tuesday. We've had as our guest and co-host for the hour environmental issues, political and policy strategist, Andrew Sandstrom. And in this final segment with Andrew, we're talking about the federal layoffs. As you know, with Doge or Dodge, or however it's supposed to be pronounced, there's been a lot of hiring freezes and people getting laid off. And one of the ones that has been very high profile is people within the Forest Service getting laid off. And so I'm going to ask Andrew now, how is this actually going, away from any kind of hype or politicization of this? What is going on in Colorado as far as federal layoffs that affect the environment, and what do you see as the implications?
so my main concern with the federal layoffs is because there's
And you wanted to make a
oh yeah,
correction
I
to
wanted
last
to
one?
make a correction. It's Senator Hickenlooper, not Senator Bennett, who is
On
yes.
co-sponsoring this bill.
Yes.
Okay.
From my about Fix Our Forests Act. But
Okay.
talking about Doge, I think that there was a lot of expansion of the federal government under Biden, and a lot of it is trimming that back. But the way it's done matters, and a lot of those layoffs that we saw 90 employees of the Forest Service laid off just here in Colorado Springs, and this is a problem because the way it was done, and I'm all for shrinking the size of government, but the way it was done directly from Doge to these employees. And so you skipped the managers. You skipped the process where you see who's more productive and who's not. And that's a problem because if you've got a campsite, there's usually one guy or one gal or a couple that live there that summer and that manage that campsite. There's going to be campsites that are going to have problems potentially. I don't know which ones specifically because there's not been a lot of information about how that's going to play out specifically, but you're going to see some campsites that are going to have problems. And then with wildfire mitigation, it's going to cause some problems because you're going to have fewer people to manage wildfires when or if they do happen. And so I think that Trump was right when he had a cabinet meeting a few months ago and he brought in Musk and he reset the terms. So he said, look, Musk can't fire your people directly. You have to fire your people. We've got some great folks in cabinet positions, Doug Burgum and others. He's not over Forest Service. He's over the other public lands offices. Let them do their job. Let them figure out where the fat is and where the meat is, right? And cut the fat. But if you do it indiscriminately, that's going to be bad. And especially where you live somewhere like the Springs, and fires are not a news article for us. They're our house potentially burning. So that's my 2 cents on that.
So are there other layoffs that you know about here that are affecting environment?
I mean, I read about the IRS and I read about some others. The one for the environment's just really the Forest Service. And I know some people say, oh, well, you're picking one of your favorites and you're saying lay them off everywhere else and don't lay them off here. I'm like, well, I live next to forests and they light on fire quite often. So I think there's a priority there.
So, I mean, we understand, and they did backtrack and say, look, we're probably going to make mistakes. We're dealing with, billions of dollars of things and doing that. But really leaving things up, I mean, this goes into the local is how can the federal government work better, as you're a policy expert, with local across the board, not just on hiring and firing? Where do you see positives about, the federal government with all its power getting involved and where it falls short, like here?
One positive that I've seen is that the Trump administration's worked to make the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and others to focus more on their regional work and their community work. And so I think that's a real positive because, look, the folks who live closest to the resource usually know the most about it. They have the most stake in it. You should
We
really
call lesser magistrate, if people know that term. Who's ever closest to the problem should be managing it. But
Exactly.
but then we also see on the local level there can be a lot of graft and a lot of
There can.
things also.
We've set up systems to manage that, but the problem is too often the federal government has tried to centralize the power in DC. The Forest Service is great, but it needs to be doing what the Trump administration's asking it to do, work locally.
Okay. Well, we're out of time, Andrew, but it was a lot sexier than I thought. And not just because how you look here and how you dress. That environmental policy is important. We need to pay attention to it. And thank you, Andrew Sandstrom, for being here, and check out his podcast, Public Lands Policy Podcast. Coming up now, Jim Miller, Just a Guy, and the Peak Rants. And Jim's talking about something to do with the environment, the growing of cannabis, the cannabis industry here now that it's legal in the Springs for rec marijuana.